From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Camila Escalante. Millions around the world are marking International Quds Day. Palestinians and those in solidarity with the cause calling for the freedom and the return of the free nation of Palestine are replacing street rallies with online events, and they're also celebrating within their vehicles amid the coronavirus pandemic. Al-Quds being the Arabic name for Jerusalem, the event usually takes place on the last Friday in the month of Ramadan and was introduced by Iran's founder Ayatollah Khamenei following the Iranian Revolution in 1979. In an address marking the event, Iran's supreme leader called Israel a cancerous tumor that will undoubtedly be uprooted and destroyed, as he likened the Zionist regime to COVID-19.
The US and Western countries equipped this fake and occupying regime with various kinds of military and non-military tools of power, even with atomic weapons. Some regional countries justify their ugly behavior and argue that the Zionist regime is a reality in the region, without realizing that deadly and detrimental realities must be fought with and destroyed. Today, the coronavirus is a reality, and the whole intelligent people consider fighting it a must. The long-lasting Zionism virus will definitely not survive for long from now on.
Now joining us to discuss this year's event and the historical significance of Quds Day is political commentator and journalist Dr. Marwa Osman. Are you with us, Dr. Marwa?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start out with the historical significance of Quds Day. Go ahead and give us a little bit of that background.
Well, it's important for people to know that Al-Quds Day started more than 40 years ago after the revolution in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The leader and the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, Sayyid Imam Khomeini, decided to start on the last day, Friday of Ramadan, 4 weeks of that month, the last Friday of Ramadan would be called Al-Quds Day to keep the Al-Quds memory in the hearts and minds of the Muslim people. But then it transcended the Muslim religion and then went on to more pro-Palestinian activists and campaigners who stand with the right of Palestine to be free against the oppression from the Israeli regime. Now, the importance of this day is not only a religious one, rather it's more of a political, social one. Why I'm saying this is because it started with Ramadan, which is a very holy month for the Muslims, and a Friday, which is a very holy day for the Muslims. Every Friday is a very holy day, just like Sundays are holy for the Christian religion. So Friday is very important. The last of Ramadan, which speaks about patience, it speaks about justice, it speaks about standing against tyranny and against the oppressors. It speaks about giving justice to the people who own the land, who have been suffering for the past 72 years since the Israeli entity came to be, founded by the Western world, mainly by Britain and the Americans later on. So this day was made to mark Al-Quds, which is the capital of Palestine, in the hearts of Muslims. And begin with, it's a very important religious city because it was the first Qibla. Qibla is the way that Muslims pray. They stand towards a certain area and they start praying. Al-Quds was the first Qibla of the Muslims, and then it changed and it became Mecca. That's with the prophet, with the last prophet Muhammad of Islam. So that's why Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Quds, is very important for Muslims. But we need to understand that Al-Quds is also very important for Christians and Jews. But I'm talking about Jews who are not Zionists. I'm talking about Jews who are actually pro-Palestinians, who know that Palestine has a full right to exist from the river to the sea, but this right has been, if you will, usurped by the colonial power, put into place by imperial powers. I'm talking about Israel being the colonial power, put in place by the British and then the Americans. Why it is important to commemorate it in this day and age? It is very important because 72 years later, this is the longest occupation in living memory. This is still the longest occupation against natives in living memory. 72 years and nothing has changed. More annexation of land, more injustice against the Palestinians, more killing of teenagers and mothers alike, not only the resistance fighters who have every right to resist, by the way, and more if you will, usurping and kidnapping the willpower, the political power, the administrative power of the Palestinians themselves, which ended with the deal of the century by Trump and Kushner.
Absolutely. So continue with that, Mara. I want to ask you how people are continuing to reject this year in particular, the so-called deal of the century of the United States and Israel.
Look, before even the deal of the century was actually announced, we heard Palestinians saying, no, this is our land, this is our right, we need to retake it. I hear a lot of my Western friends asking me sometimes, why isn't there any place for peace in the Middle East? One very vital answer, and simple, to be honest with you, is justice. You will never have peace if you don't have justice. And the epitome of injustice is the deal of the century. Why? Because if you look at the deal of the century, you see that it takes more land from the Palestinians, the West Bank, which is now occupied. It all has to be annexed by the Israeli regime. The Jordan Valley, which has the most amount of water, of clean water to be used, drank, and used for cultivation purposes, is also going to be annexed and occupied by the Israeli regime. And then you have the willpower of the Palestinians themselves. If you look at the map that is mapped out by Jared Kushner and which is accepted by Netanyahu and Trump, it's like looking at a piece of cheese that has been cut to more than 100 pieces. It's ridiculous. It's illogical. How would you talk about peace between any two groups of people, not to say two states, but because this is not the case, any two groups of people, how would you talk about peace if there's injustice there? You are not only taking away their home, their land, their willpower, their political power, their administrative power to be themselves free enough to make political decisions and administrative decisions. You're also taking their lives away, because if you say no, you will die with a bullet. Just 2 weeks ago, a 14-year-old boy was murdered in the city of Tulkarm, which is in occupied West Bank. He was murdered. He was sniped only because he's a Palestinian. Now we're getting into the apartheid state of Israel. The deal of the century was denied from day zero, not even day one, from the Palestinians, because this is a continuation of how the international community is stealing away the will and the if you will, the resistance, the real resistance of the Palestinian people. It's like someone coming into your house, taking away your house, taking away your car, and some intermediary comes along and tell you, look, we should stop fighting and talk together. But the person who stole your house, who stole your car, can have it all, and you have to sit down and listen to what we have to say. This is not intermediation. This is bigotry. This is it's bullying. It is not policing. It's the absolute opposite of policing. It's actually being a criminal, a warmongering criminal. This is what the Trump administration is doing by announcing this deal of the century. This is what Netanyahu has been doing, along with starting from Ben Gurion until today, stealing, killing Palestinians, apartheid state where the Palestinians will have, they call it a citizenship, but it's a second-class citizenship, exactly like what happened in apartheid South Africa. You are not allowed to breathe if you don't accept these rules and regulations by the Israeli occupation forces. So what kind of a deal is this? This is an imprisonment of entire people, funded, to be honest with you, by none other than Arabs themselves, by the United Arab Emirates and by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How low can this deal be any further when you have your own brothers standing with your oppressor against you? This is what the deal of the century is for the Palestinians.
Absolutely. And here in Latin America, we discuss a lot about the U.S. blockade on Cuba and Venezuela. I want to ask you, in which similar ways has Palestine been affected by similar measures?
Well, last week I was part of a campaign. It was called hashtag Stop the Sanctions. It was against sanctions against Venezuela, Cuba, Ecuador, against sanctions on Syria, on Iran, on Gaza, on Yemen, and lately on Lebanon as well. Gaza has been facing blockade for more than 16 years now. And I'm talking about full blockade, maritime blockade, aerial blockade, land blockade. They cannot even get out of Gaza, even from the Egyptian side, not only from the occupied Palestinian side. Even Egypt is standing against them. They are suffocating. They are not allowed to have electricity. They are not allowed to have clean water. All of the clean water is being taken by the Israeli colonial settlers up to the north from Gaza. They are not allowed to go. They are allowed by international law 6 nautical miles to fish. Israel kills them, snipes them if they go out more than 1.5 or maximum 2 nautical miles into the sea. So you're suffocating people, no water, no food, no electricity, no airport. You basically, this is the biggest prison on earth. It's the biggest open prison on earth. This is how Gaza has been suffering from the sanctions. Why? Because they were able to liberate this small patch of land because of the resistance, and they were like, well, you want to keep us out, we're going to suffocate you. This is what they have been doing again for Gaza for more than 16 years. And this is exactly what they did to Lebanon for 22 years. Just today, we commemorate, it's a coincidence, but it's a very nice coincidence. Today, we commemorate the 20th anniversary of liberating South Lebanon from the Israeli entity. They suffocated us for 22 years until our resistance, along with our army, stopped them, took the land back, and kicked them out of our land and our soil, and gave us back our freedom to move along, freedom to build our houses again, our businesses, and to fish in our seas as well. And now we are fighting with the Zionist entity, with the Israelis in Lebanon, to try and get our own oil from our territorial waters, and they won't let us. Why? Because they have the backing of the United States of America. So consider that, and we are free. Now put it on Gaza, which is being blockaded from every side. And if you look at the West Bank as well, the occupied West Bank, the occupied Jerusalem, they're also being suffocated. Have you seen the wall? Have the people seen the wall, the apartheid wall that goes all the way through the Jerusalem and other villages in the West Bank? This is apartheid. If it's not apartheid, I don't know what you're going to call it. But it's taking the lives of the people. It's cutting their houses in the middle. It's ridiculously, it's laughable, but it's very painful at the same time, because it's happening in 2020 when the international community keeps telling us that we, the natives, are the savages, and the Israelis are actually the democracy in the region.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. Marwa. And I would like to ask as well, this is Quds Day is an important day to mark for peace-loving, freedom-loving people in support of the Palestinian cause all around the world. We've heard many people say that as well. And at the same time, I would like to hear your thoughts on the fact that there are 5 Iranian oil tankers making their way to Venezuela right now. I know you know about that. Give us your thoughts on that.
I actually tweeted by mistake that they broke the blockade, because I was very, very happy and excited that they are going to break that blockade against Venezuela. But apparently they entered international waters instead of Venezuela territorial waters. And I'm pretty sure that they will break that blockade. And even more importantly, they not only will break that blockade to give products very much needed by the suffocating Venezuelan people who deserve to be free from every imperial power, they will also be bartering it with gold. And this is what's going to make the US go crazy. The gasoline that's going to go into Venezuela, Iran will take gold and not US dollars out of Venezuela. This is telling the imperial power that is grabbing the entire resources on this planet that stay still. Wait a second, we will not allow you to suffocate us anymore. We will do the trading the way we want to do it. We will not abide by your rules, because they are not rules. This is warmongering policies. And if you dare stop us, we are ready to go to war. I think this is the best message to be given right here and right now, especially with the pandemic, with the global pandemic that everyone is suffering from. This is the time where we need to stand together, not to be cut out of the world and suffocate it more with US sanctions. I think that this is a great message from the people of Iran towards the people of Venezuela, telling them, despite the distance between us, we are brothers. We should cooperate, especially in the face of all tyrants and all oppressors.
Thank you so much. That was a very good message to end on. We've been speaking to Dr. Marwa Osman. She is a political commentator joining us from Beirut today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, now on to a short break. We'll be right back with more. Don't go away. Welcome back. A passenger plane belonging to state-run Pakistani International Airlines has crashed near the southern port city of Karachi. The aircraft arriving from the eastern city of Lahore was carrying 99 passengers and 8 crew members, according to the spokesman for the country's Civil Aviation Authority. There were no immediate reports on the number of casualties. The residential area on the edge of the airport, known as Model Colony, is a poor community and is heavily congested. President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, announced the strengthening of curfew and quarantine measures in border states with Colombia after 36 imported cases of COVID-19 were confirmed.
We are making decisions to reinforce the border, to create quarantine capabilities at the border. All those decisions have already been made and are being executed. Curfews in the border crossing municipalities are being enforced. 14-day quarantine for all those who enter here. And then, when this quarantine is over, they arrive with their PCR test to their state. For example, Aragua, Anzoátegui, Monagas, Caracas, La Guaira, and they are submitted to a new quarantine.
Vice President Delcy Rodriguez also reiterated a complaint against Colombia's immigration authorities for promoting the informal passage of Venezuelan migrants through the border without any control protocol to prevent the spread of the virus.
Yesterday, in a meeting with international organizations, the Presidential Commission called for their intervention with Colombia's immigration authorities. Health workers in Colombia's border states are promoting the informal passage of Venezuelans without any control. We have evidence that they are being placed in transport units that are already contaminated, and that's why numbers coming in from Colombia are so high.
And on Thursday, the government of Venezuela presented new evidence of the foiled attack by U.S. and Venezuelan mercenaries. The Vice President of Communication, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced a link between the attackers and the Colombian gang Los Pachencas. He also denounced a link with the Operation Gideon and drug traffickers in Colombia for the supply of weapons. Rodriguez said that parts of the Colombian armed forces knew of this conspiracy against Venezuela.
We have audios that have reached us, not only due to leaks, but by indignated voices inside the Colombian armed forces who see the alliances between those armed traitors and deserters who are training in the northern region of Colombia, with the drug traffickers that supposedly the government of Colombia is combating, the drug traffickers that allegedly the DEA is combating. And Donald Trump announces operations against drug trafficking, but it seems that it has achieved the opposite. It has strengthened the powerful drug cartels in northern Colombia.
And in a video confession, one of the U.S. mercenaries said that opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido hired Jordan Grudeau for a terrorist incursion and that he chose him due to his proximity to U.S. President Donald Trump.
Guaido chose to work for me.
Why?
Because he believed that Jordan Grudeau had close ties with Donald Trump and the United States government.
Do you think they have chosen Jordan Grudeau because of his proximity to Donald Trump?
Yes, it would seem that that's the impression that Guaido has.
Are you aware of how much Guaido paid in advance for training, weapons, and other logistics?
Before I was made aware of more information here, I was not, but I assumed that he was funneling money to support the mission.
Venezuelan Attorney General Tarek William Saab has sent a letter to the President of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, to officially inform the U.S. Congress on the mercenary raid on Venezuelan territory on May the 3rd.
Last Tuesday, a letter addressed to the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, was sent and received. We provided information to the United States Congress on the events surrounding the so-called Operation Gideon, which was nothing more than an incursion to the massacre, to generate a massacre, to commit terrorist acts by mercenaries hired by a United States company.
Now over to Brazil, where public hospital workers have protested in the capital over unpaid wages. In the midst of the pandemic, medical workers announced that they have not been paid for 2 months as demonstrators called for President Jair Bolsonaro's impeachment for his handling of the COVID-19 crisis. More than 290,000 people in Brazil have been infected with the new coronavirus, making the nation the third worst hit in the world as nearly 19,000 people have died. The state of Sao Paulo, which has registered nearly 70,000 coronavirus cases and more than 5,000 deaths, has drawn far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's ire for closing non-essential businesses and for ordering residents to stay home.
Today, we are now 15 days behind, so there are residents in several places in Brazil in the middle of the pandemic who have not received a salary.
A gente tem falta de equipamento de proteção individual, a gente não tem nenhuma assistência no caso de contrair coronavírus, né, em ambiente de trabalho, a gente não tem nenhum direito em relação a isso.
We have just filled the most consistent, strongest and most robust request for impeachment. More than 400 organizations, 6 political parties, leading figures from civil society.
Scientists in Argentina have developed a new rapid and low-cost test for COVID-19. Researchers at the Cesar Milsten Institute of Science developed a new testing kit in order to help support the country's testing capacities. After proving its effectiveness and low cost to the government, now plans to manufacture 10,000 tests and reach the target of 100,000 neo-kit COVID-19 tests per week.
It is a project whose fundamental characteristic is its simplicity. That means that with few chemicals, few elements within the kit, it develops quickly and the visualization is absolutely fast, as it's visual. It would be around $8 to $10, which would be less than a half of, even in some cases, a third of what a PCR kit costs.
The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, announced an extension of talks for the renegotiation of the foreign debt until June the 2nd.
We will not tie Argentina to new commitments that we cannot fulfill. I want the world to see us as an honorable country that fulfills its commitments. And therefore we will do no more than what we must do, so that the commitments we make to our creditors do not mean a further neglect of our people.
In Honduras, drivers protested to demand economic assistance from the government due to the mandatory lockdown. Main streets have been blocked by thousands of drivers and leaders of the transport sector in various regions of the country. The protest disrupted citizens' mobilization in the Honduran capital as the country reports over 3,000 cases of COVID-19 and 151 deaths. The employment crisis in the United States continues to worsen during the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Department of Labor, nearly 39 million people have lost their jobs despite the easing of restrictions. A projection by the Federal Reserve points out that the unemployment rate could hit 25%. That's a quarter of all U.S. citizens or people in the U.S. without employment. However, the country also faces the coronavirus crisis, which has continued to intensify over the past 2 months with over 1.5 million cases and almost 95,000 deaths reported. Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei blasted U.S. President Donald Trump over the deportations of migrants who have the coronavirus. The deportation saturated quarantine centers in Guatemala and heaped pressure on the Central American country's weak health system. As of Thursday, 119 Guatemalan migrants were diagnosed with the coronavirus. The Central American country had requested to the U.S. immigration authorities that the deported migrants be examined before leaving their country, 72 hours before boarding their flight, to determine whether they were carriers of the virus. The president explained that the arrival of infected migrants is overloading the precarious health system, which has caused serious problems for the country. In Guyana, the recount of votes cast in the March 2nd general elections continues, with 71 ballot boxes tallied on Wednesday at the end of day 15. Guyana's Election Commission began a 25-day recount to declare a winner starting on May the 6th. The total number of boxes recounted so far is 789 out of 2,339. In an effort to speed up the process, GCOM's chairperson has announced plans to ask the National COVID-19 Task Force for two more workstations. 8 ranks attached to Guyana's Presidential Guard have tested positive for COVID-19. The police force said that the tests were conducted randomly and that the patients have been quarantined. However, the Director of Public Information at the Ministry of the Presidency assured that the ranks are not a part of the Special Protective Service arm of the unit, so they were not responsible for the close protection of President David Granger, who has been working remotely, nor his family. Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown has rejected the United States' decision to block medical supplies from reaching some Caribbean countries to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. He spoke during an exclusive interview with Telesur.
I thought it was somewhat myopic for them to have intervened and to stop those shipments because they were not significant. They would not have made a difference in terms of the health response within the United States. I think it was very unfortunate, but notwithstanding that, we were able to get supplies elsewhere to the extent that our pre-COVID situation, which was very vulnerable, we would have strengthened our health infrastructure.
And you can catch that interview on We Caribbean, which airs every Wednesday. We've reached the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And we're on social media. I'm on Twitter at Camila Telesur, and we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Camila Escalante. Thanks for watching.